The world stands in disbelief tonight. The United States and Israel have abruptly abandoned Gaza ceasefire negotiations in Cairo, leaving the Egypt-hosted summit in complete disarray. What went wrong? And what does this collapse mean for the region's fragile peace? Let's break it down. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight's story comes from Cairo, where the long-anticipated Gaza ceasefire summit has just collapsed. After days of intense back and forth, both the United States and Israel have walked away from the negotiation table, effectively ending what diplomats once called the last real chance for a truce in Gaza. The Egyptian-hosted summit had brought together key mediators, including representatives from Qatar, the UN, and several European observers, in hopes of achieving a sustainable pause in the ongoing violence. However, as the talks stretched into late-night sessions, tensions soared, and the American and Israeli delegations abruptly departed, citing irreconcilable differences. The announcement sent shockwaves through global capitals. World leaders have expressed frustration and disbelief, warning that the collapse could lead to another deadly escalation in the already devastated Gaza Strip. In this report, we'll examine what triggered this diplomatic fallout, who stands to gain or lose from it, and what this means for the people trapped in Gaza. We'll also explore reactions from Washington, Tel Aviv, Cairo, and beyond, and analyze the potential consequences for regional stability in the Middle East. Stay with us as we unfold the events that have stunned the international community. The Cairo ceasefire summit was the culmination of months of diplomatic effort aimed at halting the devastating Gaza conflict. Egypt, acting as a neutral mediator, invited delegations from Israel, the United States, and Palestinian factions including Hamas, to participate in what was billed as a decisive round of negotiations. The world had pinned cautious hope on Egypt's initiative. With Washington's influence over Israel and Cairo's established communication channels with Hamas, this was seen as one of the few platforms capable of bridging decades of mistrust. In the lead up to the talks, humanitarian conditions in Gaza had reached catastrophic levels. The United Nations warned of mass displacement, starvation, and medical collapse. Western nations urged restraint, while Arab states pressed for a ceasefire that would pave the way for long-term stability. But as the first sessions began, deep divisions emerged. Israeli officials demanded the complete disarmament of Hamas before any truce could be signed, while Palestinian representatives insisted on lifting the blockade and securing aid guarantees. Diplomats described the atmosphere as tense but hopeful, until the moment that hope evaporated. By the second day, cracks had widened beyond repair, and tempers flared behind closed doors. What followed would reshape the course of the conflict entirely. Behind the scenes, several sources suggest that the talks unraveled over a critical sticking point: control of Gaza's border crossings and the role of international peacekeepers. Israel reportedly demanded exclusive oversight of all crossings to prevent weapons smuggling, while Egypt and the Palestinian side pushed for a joint security mechanism under UN supervision. The U.S. delegation backed Israel's stance, insisting that security must precede governance. When Hamas representatives refused to accept these terms, citing violations of sovereignty, tempers flared. According to leaked diplomatic cables, the atmosphere turned confrontational. Egyptian mediators attempted to salvage the session, but trust between the delegations had collapsed. A senior European diplomat described the moment. It was as if the room froze. No one spoke for minutes, and then the Americans simply stood up and left. Within hours, Israel followed suit, officially withdrawing from the summit. The decision blindsided Cairo, which had invested enormous political capital in these talks. Egyptian officials reportedly viewed the withdrawal as a public humiliation and a setback to their regional credibility. By morning, the summit was effectively over, replaced by confusion, frustration, and a deepening sense of hopelessness. For Egypt, the summit's failure was not just a diplomatic embarrassment, but a serious blow to its regional leadership. Cairo had positioned itself as the primary broker of peace, balancing relations between Washington, Tel Aviv, and Palestinian factions. In an official statement, Egypt's foreign ministry expressed deep regret over the breakdown and accused certain parties of prioritizing political agendas over humanitarian needs. State media reflected a tone of restrained anger, suggesting that Egypt had been sidelined despite its efforts. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's administration had hoped to restore Egypt's historical role as a stabilizing force in the Arab world. Instead, analysts say the summit's collapse exposes the limits of Cairo's influence in a rapidly changing regional order. Domestically, the Egyptian public reacted with frustration and sympathy for Gaza. Calls for renewed solidarity with Palestinians spread across social media, while opposition voices criticized the government for trusting foreign powers that never intended to compromise. Diplomats in Cairo now face the challenge of rebuilding credibility while avoiding open confrontation with Israel or the United States. It's a delicate balancing act, one that could define Egypt's foreign policy for years to come. In Washington, the White House maintained a defensive tone. Officials described the decision to withdraw from the talks as unfortunate but necessary, arguing that the conditions presented by Hamas were unrealistic and unconstructive. Behind the scenes, however, the move reflects growing frustration within the Biden administration. American negotiators reportedly viewed the process as stagnating and were unwilling to make further concessions amid mounting domestic criticism over U.S. support for Israel. Political analysts suggest that U.S. patience had run out. With elections approaching, the administration faces pressure from both humanitarian advocates demanding restraint and pro-Israel groups urging firm action. Walking away from the summit allowed Washington to project strength while avoiding a political quagmire. However, international observers warn that the withdrawal could undermine America's credibility as a peace broker. European diplomats privately described the move as short-sighted and counterproductive. For now, Washington insists that it remains committed to peace. But the collapse of Cairo's summit leaves few avenues open for meaningful dialogue. The United States may soon find that its regional influence, once unquestioned, is now under serious strain. Israel's decision to abandon the summit aligns with its increasingly hardline security posture. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, facing internal political pressure and international scrutiny, framed the withdrawal as a stand against terrorist manipulation. Israeli officials argue that Hamas's demands, particularly the lifting of the blockade and release of prisoners, were unacceptable without guarantees for Israel's long-term security. In a televised statement, Netanyahu declared that no ceasefire will come at the cost of Israel's safety. Critics, however, accuse the Israeli government of sabotaging diplomacy. Opposition figures and human rights groups contend that Israel's rigid stance has prolonged the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The withdrawal also highlights growing rifts within the Israeli political establishment. Some security officials reportedly favored continuing the dialogue, fearing that the collapse of talks would escalate tensions further. Internationally, Israel's move has drawn condemnation from Arab states and cautious concern from Europe. The consensus among analysts is clear: while Israel may have won a short-term political victory, it risks deepening its isolation in the long run. As the summit collapsed, Gaza's civilians continued to bear the brunt of the conflict. Hospitals remain overwhelmed, infrastructure lies in ruins, and thousands of families have been displaced multiple times. The failure of the ceasefire talks has extinguished what little hope many Gazans had for relief. The United Nations reports worsening shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. Aid convoys face increasing challenges due to security restrictions, and power outages have become routine. Local doctors describe impossible conditions, with surgeries performed by flashlight and dwindling access to medicine. Meanwhile, humanitarian agencies warn that famine could become a reality if access routes remain blocked. For the people of Gaza, diplomatic breakdowns translate directly into suffering. Each delay in negotiations means more lives lost, more families uprooted, and more despair. The international community's inability to secure even a temporary ceasefire raises uncomfortable questions about moral responsibility. For millions trapped in Gaza, the collapse of the Egypt summit is not a political setback. It is a human tragedy unfolding in real time. The news of the summit's collapse sparked widespread reactions across global capitals. The European Union expressed deep disappointment, calling for renewed diplomatic efforts. The United Nations urged all sides to return to dialogue immediately. In contrast, Russia and China criticized the US and Israel, accusing them of undermining multilateral peace initiatives. Moscow's foreign ministry called the withdrawal a reckless act that destabilizes the region, while Beijing emphasized the need for balanced negotiation free of external pressure. Across the Arab world, frustration turned to anger. From Amman to Beirut, protests erupted demanding stronger action to protect Palestinians. Social media trended with hashtags like Face Ceasefire Now and Full Egypt Summit Fail, reflecting growing public disillusionment. Even traditional U.S. allies such as France and Germany issued unusually strong statements, urging Washington to reconsider its approach. In the court of global opinion, the collapse of the Cairo summit represents not only a failed negotiation, but a test of international will. Whether the world learns from it remains uncertain. The breakdown of the Cairo talks threatens to reshape Middle Eastern dynamics. Without a ceasefire, regional tensions could intensify, drawing in neighboring countries. Analysts warn that instability may spill across borders, with militias and political movements exploiting the chaos. Egypt now faces heightened security risks along its Sinai frontier, while Jordan and Lebanon brace for potential refugee surges. Meanwhile, Iran has seized on the moment to strengthen its position as a defender of Palestinian resistance. Tehran's officials framed the summit's collapse as proof of Western hypocrisy. The diplomatic void left by Washington and Tel Aviv could be filled by alternative power centers, including Russia, China, and Turkey, eager to expand their influence in the region. The Middle East, long described as fragile, may be entering a new phase of strategic realignment. And at the center of it all lies Gaza, a strip of land whose suffering continues to shape the politics of an entire region. As the dust settles, one question remains: what comes next? With negotiations shattered and trust eroded, prospects for peace appear bleak. Yet history has shown that diplomacy, no matter how broken, has a way of resurfacing when the costs of war become unbearable. Egypt's government has vowed to continue seeking dialogue, even if through smaller bilateral channels. The UN and regional players like Qatar may attempt to revive indirect talks in the coming weeks. But without renewed commitment from the United States and Israel, the path forward looks uncertain. For now, the world watches, weary, divided, and anxious, as the Gaza conflict edges closer to another dangerous chapter. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth geopolitical coverage. Your support helps us continue bringing you credible reports from around the world. Stay tuned, stay informed, and as always, question everything.